In Franklin public hearing on zoning articles 8 and 14. The Planning and Zoning Commission has made some revisions and forwarded those to council. And we are going to have a public hearing now, and we're going to turn the meeting over to our consultant, Fred Guerra, and our zoning director, Barry Gano.
Thank you. You should have a copy of this. It's sort of like a PowerPoint. We don't have a projector. And I want to go over this and give an overview. And then we can go into the document where you have any questions. So let me get here, set this up here. Okay, so what we'll be talking about is really what we spent all the time on was Article 8 supplemental land use regulations. But because we made changes to supplemental land use regulations, we had to go into Article 14 definitions, and we had to add some definitions in that weren't there. So that's why there were changes to that too. Since some of you were not here from the beginning of this process, when we laid out our path of amending the zoning code, I wanted to spend a little time and go through that again so you understand that those uses here. When we started this, we submitted a diagnostic report. We looked at the zoning code, we looked at some subdivision regulations, and we said, we need to make changes. And so we created the way of doing that. And we separated it into 3 phases. The first phase, which this public hearing deals with Article 8, is the end of the code maintenance phase. We said it'll take about a year to do that. That was really going in and looking at things that needed to be made immediately. And we talked to staff, we talked to city council, we had meetings with you guys, and we had planning commission meetings, and we identified things that we couldn't wait any longer. We had to make the changes, and that's what we're doing now. We're starting phase 2, in which we put everything into a consolidated land use code, subdivision, zoning, site design, administrative procedures, things like that. We're starting to work on that now. And then we also said that the third phase, which may or may not take place, depending what we do with the second phase, is creating special districts. I'll talk a little bit about that. You go to page 4. Code maintenance included improving and organizing administrative processes, creating enforcement and penalty procedures. We had no penalty enforcement procedures for the code. Revised riparian development setbacks. And that was something that the staff really needed changes made to. A lot of these documents that we're dealing with today are old township documents. And they were just carried over to village to city. For example, riparian was really the county's regulations for townships. Then finally, after we went through riparian, we modified the RL districts and starting its lot setback and building coverages because we had a lot of variances. And we had to take care of those variances. You shouldn't have 30, 40 variances a year. Or whatever it was. We had a lot. Yeah. And so when we got into that, we also decided to make some changes to R3 because RL was separated from R3 maybe in the early 2000s. And so there were some things that we had to make changes. So we made some changes to R3 also. And now the 5th part of this phase 1 was supplemental, Article 8 supplemental land use regulations. And I call this the dumping grounds for a lot of amendments. Anytime we had to make an amendment, it was easy to put it in the supplemental. And that's why it was so disappointing that we needed to make changes. Phase 2, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. This is really putting the code together, putting the subdivision, having a real subdivision code. We're using the counties right now. And so we're all said and done with one unified document with all land use regulations. And that's what we're working on now. In fact, the Planning Commission will get a draft of the new subdivision regulations here, hopefully this month. They can look at it in October. And then the special districts. Like I said, these aren't written in stone. I think probably the one that we're is the most important when I look at, we have, it's on, I'm sorry, page 6. It's a great traditional neighborhood districts that are more walkable. And, you know, if we do one of those, I think it would be in the Portage Lakes area, because of the lakes and doing some, fixing up some of the, or having some regulations for retail and other things. But I think the most important is creating some type of historic district for the village of Manchester, creating some regulations for that. I think it's something we, and we'll have a year of talking about that, whether we want to do it, but I think it's a good idea to create a special district. And then we talked about creating conservation districts, residential conservation districts. And again, we'll talk more about that. In one of the areas we said, because when we looked at your sewer area maps, there's a Pancake Creek area. That might be a good location for a conservation district. And so that was the icing on the cake if we wanted to do that. But really phase 2 and phase 1 are the most important. You know, you may never get to phase 3 if you don't want to do that. But I think it's worth a discussion and for us to look at that. So let's get into Article 8, supplemental land use regulation. Go to page 8. You know, it looks like there's a lot of changes in it, and it's really repackaging a lot of it. Is the goals were to reorganize it, make it more flowable, we can find things easier. Eliminate things that we no longer need. We have a whole section on gas and oil wells. Gas and oil wells haven't been regulated by cities since the 1990s. But we still have that chapter in here. The state took it away from the cities, ODNR, a lot of different reasons. But we wanted more gas and oil wells in the state. There was a lot of disapprovals by locals, cities, and so they took it away and ODNR through water. So we don't need something like that. And there were some other things we really need, not as much as that. We wanted to put some updating. Like I said, this chapter, there's been changes constantly, probably since the village days. Colorado, there's a lot of things that we need to add that were needed. So we updated some things. We tried to simplify it. You see tables, a lot more tables than we had before. It's always easy to look at a table, you know, and see what a regulation is. And then we wanted to coordinate things. So those are the main goals. Like I said, there's not a lot new in this. Like we added wind turbines. Not that anybody's going to put a wind turbine in here in the city in the near future, but if someone does, we have regulations for it now. We have solar regulations, solar panels. You're seeing more and more of those. We have no regulations for solar panels, so we had to create some regulations that where they are located at, how far they're off the lot, how they're attached to the roof. We had to do those because if you don't have those regulations, then it makes it difficult in the zoning department to enforce anything that's done wrong. That's one of the reasons you have regulations. So let's go to page 9. And you can see when we say reorganize and make it useful. And you see on the left-hand side, there are 12 chapters basically in this. And then the new one, we have 9 chapters. And I just want to go over this a little bit. As you go down through this, we took out utility services. That was one that we eliminated. That's really a subdivision requirement. It'll be in the subdivision. It doesn't need to be in this code. And it really didn't really say anything. I don't know the reason for it. I looked at it and said, if you still need it here, we will. I took out 800.909 oil and gas regulations. We already said we have no jurisdiction over that. We made no changes to 10 and 11. Junk motor vehicle regulations, litter and trash regulations. We are eventually, in the second phase, going to create a property maintenance article, and those will be moved into that property maintenance article. 12 is alternative energy system regulations. That was moved to a different location. That's in the conditional uses now. And then we had, in wireless telecommunications, this is a conditional use, it's a truly conditional use for that. Home occupations is now in accessory uses. So it'll be one of the accessory uses. There'll be additional we'll add in the future. But it'll be, so we made them more of what they are. They didn't need to be a separate chapter or something by themselves. So they're still in there, but they're coordinated. The other thing we had to do, we weren't going to make any changes to the conditional use one, which is, what is it here? For specific requirements for conditional permitted uses. But we found out in a recent conditional use that the table in Article 5 was different than the regulations in Article 8. And the headings weren't the same. And so what we ended up doing was moving things around to how the headings are in the matrix or the table in 5. And so when we're ready, we'll have it set up correctly. So there was no changes made other than displaying them different. So they match what the table is. Because if you read the table and you didn't read Article 8, you may have had, it was, some of the things were different. And so we had to begin that. And we will start here this fall, in early winter, go into Article 8 and start making those changes that need to be made. And it seems that the table may have been older than the things in Article 8. So, and they won't correspond to each other. So again, what we ended up doing was we separated accessory buildings, because buildings are different than, for example, 802 is accessory structures. A structure is a porch or a gazebo. A building is a garage or or a pool house, something like that. We added temporary accessory structures. We had nothing for temporary accessory structures. So we created that. We 800.4 outdoor storage and display. We had no residential outdoor storage requirements. So if you had a camper or a boat, there were no requirements for it. We didn't make a lot of requirements. The Planning Commission was specific about that. We don't want to, this is New Franklin, we don't want to be Hudson. Sorry about that. So we took some time and we made some changes, but you had to add some regulations. We had accessory uses. Well, a home occupation is an accessory use, so it did need its own chapter. When we get into phase 2, if any of you were at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, we also had mixed-use buildings in there, and we had also we had like mother-in-law suites, accessory units. The commission liked those, but they thought it wasn't the time to do that now. So when we get into phase 2, we may have that. And the question comes up about accessory units, like they're sometimes called mother-in-law suites. The trend now is to allow your parents, or as we do, or us to live with a child or their family without having to go into independent living, assisted living, and so you can do it with regulations that you have, accessory unit. The code doesn't allow that now. So we want to get it. I think it's something we want to look at in the future. And the commission will agree with the regulations we have, but they thought let's deal with that in phase 2. So that's why we created a separate accessory use section that will add 2 more chapters possibly, other than home occupations. We talked about the conditional use permits. Agricultural uses, we weren't going to make any changes to this when we started off. However, there was the moratorium on chickens and portions. So we had to put chickens, and then we started with chickens. We said, well, we probably should deal with bees. And we dealt with bees, and then we started talking about tweaking some of the other things that we found out. I'll go with in more detail, but we ended up doing some tweaking. And then For junk, dismantled vehicles, and litter and trash, no changes, it's just gonna be carried over until we create the new article for that. So on page 10, not gonna spend a lot of time, you can see all those accessory uses were at 800.01. And we really needed to separate those. So we ended up doing buildings, because buildings are different than structures, and then we had temporary structures, chapter, we had outdoor storage and display, and then we had accessory. So we moved 800.1, 800.2 from 2 chapters to 5 chapters, because it made sense. We tried to simplify it. It made more sense to simplify it by separating it, if that makes sense. So go to page 11. Some of the significant changes that we made, tables instead of text. Tables are easy to understand with text. We separated regulations by building structures and temporary uses. Attached garages are not counted as accessory building calculations. One of the problems I've always had in my previous work is that if you have a house that has an attached garage, and you have land enough to put a detached garage, we always say, okay, your garage is 250 square feet, now you can't build that. If we allow 1,000 square feet, you have to subtract the 250 square feet. And it never made sense because sometimes these garages were built your house was built in the 60s and 50s and 70s, and garages were smaller then. And we ended up a lot of times seeing those garages being converted to a den or something, extra bedroom, lunch in the kitchen. And then you built this detached building. Now you could have put 1,000 square feet instead of 750 square feet. Yeah. So I always said, if we ever work on a code again, I would separate that. So we took it out. And I think everybody agreed that was a good way of doing it. So you're not penalized for the attached garage. Accessory building square footage and quantity is based on lot size. The code the way it is today, you had a service building, you had a shed, you had a garage, and they all had separate regulations. When I was playing around with what ifs, there are times you can have an enormous amount of square footage, or sometimes not enough square footage. So we made it easy, which most codes do, just by lot size. This is what you're allowed. So you're allowed, if you want a full house, you want a garage, you want a shed, you can do 3 buildings. But as long as they don't max out, you have a max on them. So it makes it much easier for enforcement, for approval, for looking at, did I miss this? What's a service structure versus a garage? So we made it easier. The final bullet point here is attached enclosed porches and patios are only regulated by setbacks. These are your structures. Always with the question, okay, somebody has a gazebo in the backyard, it's what, how many square feet? 50 square feet, okay, you have to subtract that. So those structures, porches, as long as they're not enclosed, that we're only, you just have to meet the setbacks. We don't care what the size of these are the setbacks. It makes it easier. It makes it easier on residents to enforcement. So on page 12, these tables, I won't get into the code. These are what the tables look like. And these are accessory building tables. The one on the left has what those structures are, if they're permitted. In most cases, in this case, they're permitted. And then additional, if there's any additional requirements, it would be on that last column on the image. The table on the right is the actual table. I have to confess that these tables were the tables that I gave the planning commission. The ones in the final draft were a little bit different because the planning commission made some changes. And the major change was in the table on the right on square foot max. There was some confusion on where you look at where it says 500 square foot per acre plus 150 square foot per half acre. And we added, I'll go to that, give me a second, I want to get the right wording on that. We added on that plus 150 square feet for each addition, so each it's additional, so it made it a little bit clearer. So those are what the tables. If you go to page 13, you can see that same table, what it looks like. What those tables are. Page 14, again, on temporary structures, it's the same format. So instead of having all this text that you have to read, you can just go in here and say, okay, inflatable structure is permitted, go to definitions, it'll tell you what an inflatable structure is. It just made it easier to figure out what, if something's allowed or not allowed. Go to page 15, new residential outdoor storage regulations. The only change we made to this article or this chapter was for residential. We had something in there that we moved here, it was for mobile home parks. That was in the code, and we added it to this section. But basically what we said was, you can park a vehicle, you just have to have a setback of 10 feet, and you can't park it in the right of way, basically. Those are the only changes. And the planning and zoning commission didn't want to, they wanted people to be able to store things, so there weren't a lot of changes, but those are the changes that were made in this section. On page 16, updated home occupation regulations. Basically, the home occupations are pretty close to what they are today, except for a few things. We're now allowing you to do a home occupation in, it really should say an accessory building. I have to hear the structure, it's really an accessory building. A lot of times today, we have different home occupations. And we separate, the code sort of separated before into offices and businesses. And so now we're allowing you to put, if you're a roofer, I'm just using that as an example, and you have a garage, you can run your business out of that garage. You have to store things inside. The gold code basically said you couldn't do that. You had to spend within, I think it was 30% of the dwelling unit. And so you had a lot of people that were running good home businesses, that were doing it sort of illegal. We were looking the other way, but now we're saying you can do it in an accessory building. Also, you can be an accountant in your backyard. You can do a little shed, and if you want to put your accounting business in that little shed, you can do it. You don't have to keep it in that, but now we're allowing that because we're seeing more of that. Again, we separate home offices from home businesses in a way. We still have Group A and Group B in the middle code, but we changed a little bit. The commission also wanted to eliminate that percentage of what you can do in a home occupation. I think it was 30%. I think we had it, or maybe 25%.
I thought it was 30.
30 or 25. And they didn't like that idea. They said, if you're running a home occupation and you're meeting all the other requirements, who's going to go in? Is Barry going to go inside your house and measure? You just have 30% of the house being used, or it doesn't make sense. So we're saying you could basically run it in a home occupation. You still have to live there. You can't take the house and turn it into, I've seen into bedroom 1 has riding lawnmowers, bedroom 2 has push mowers, and you can't do that. You have to live there, but we're not putting percentages to it. And the chapter is also set up to that and talking about accessory uses. Page 17. We talked about the conditional use permits. We basically had to reorganize this a little bit to get it ready for phase 2. And the only real change we did was wind turbines. In my 40 years, we've had wind turbines built. And we had to create regulations for it. So it's better to have those regulations in place in case you get one. And who knows, you might get one. And there are regulations of where they can go. And sometimes even cities like to put a wind turbine in a lot of our like a cell tower. So those are the only changes. On page 18, we updated, like you said, the agricultural uses. We we added poultry regulations as we talked about, and I think most people were satisfied with it. We had to make changes. We added apiary regulations. We found out that there were a lot of agricultural uses in B1 zoning. And the agricultural chapter didn't allow agriculture use in B1, so we added that to it. You can do it in B1. We also allowed for larger farmers markets, or that you can do, or that would be in some of these areas if you met certain specifics. So we tweaked it a little bit to add that to it. And then we added, we expanded the livestock regulations, and I think Sharon's here, and she had some additional suggestions. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to it. We're not against those, the planning commission didn't approve it with those changes, and it's up to you whether they want. Page 19, the eliminated sections. Some of them were good, some of them were oil and gas well regulations, we have no authority, as well as satellite television, that power was taken away from the group. These were really built for the big satellite dishes, before the small ones. And now you even have joint TV, I don't think even has dishes anymore, Dish Network. Everything is done differently. So we took that out. And the utility services for underground utilities really needs to be in the subdivision. It's there. So it was really in the subdivision regulations and also this. So we took it out. Page 20, as I said, there's nothing strategic about this other than we had to add regulations and things that we didn't have, like inflatables and things like that. We had to add to definitions. We also, the goal is to have one definition chapter or article with all the definitions. Not right now you have certain chapters with certain definitions like agricultural. So we moved all the agricultural definitions out of that chapter and they're in the definitions. So to make things so those are the only changes we made. So that's basically the overview of what we did. Any questions? I don't know. I'll turn it back to you. I don't know how you want to do this.
I don't know what time would permit, but I don't know if you guys had a chance to review and go through a bunch of the articles, and I know I had a handful of questions. You want him to go through, like start off with each one and work your way through, or?
Why don't you just ask me a question? They may cover everything that anybody would want to know, is what I'm saying.
You could.
I think that might be quicker.
One of the first ones I had was under accessory uses, that's 800.5. We get down to, this is under the home occupations. It's going to be Q. What is this here? Home occupation standards. This is number 5, Q. It speaks to basically storage of trailers and stuff like that.
All equipment, supplies, stock materials, and trailers used for landscaping, lawn maintenance, construction, remodeling, or a related business shall be parked or stored only within an enclosed garage or accessory building.
Right, so we're talking about trailers and stuff like that. Is it realistic to think that somebody would park an enclosed trailer in their garage? We have a lot of tradesmen out here, a lot of blue-collar people that live out here, and they could work for, let's just say, ABC Roofing, and they could bring a truck home with a trailer with them, and that company is stationed at an actual commercial location. They could drive that truck home every day with those two, the trailer and truck attached, park them in the yard and not violate anything. As soon as they move that home office into their home, now they're in violation of our code. It seems like a slight inequity to somebody bringing tax dollars into the city and having the business operate here versus in another community.
That's in the code today, but I agree with you. Right now, you can park a commercial type truck if you don't have a home occupation. on your property outdoors. So you're right. So now if you have a business, and I think there must have been something, I always say when you see regulations real specific, you have a problem with an individual or individuals in the past and you made regulations that I'm sure didn't happen. But we can work on this a little bit, that, maybe limit it to so many vehicles and meeting the setback requirements from outdoor storage. We can do that. I mean, that's,
In other words, this isn't the last time you're gonna be looking at these.
yeah, I assume we're gonna have a public hearing, and you can still make some changes, and we can make those changes, and get you a revised copy before you vote on it, and you'll see those changes.
Would that be what you'd recommend, is we go through and mark up comments and get those to the group? And then that comes back to us again with,
Well, I'd like to, it's up to you. If we can get comments today, we can make those changes. That's why I have my computer, I'm just going ahead and putting comments for those sections, and then we can make those changes. And if you have any other suggestions after the meeting, you can give to Barry, and we can, try it, and then we'll, as we did with the planning commission, we'll redo it, and you'll see those changes, and we'll highlight them, and you can look at them that way. I mean, that's the easiest way of doing it. I think when you get to a point where you're making some really major changes, then it needs to go back to the planning commission. But little changes like this, I think they're, I don't think the planning commission or in this case, the public still has to comment on it with the planning commission. And Barry, you correct me if I'm wrong, they would have real issues with some of the changes.
I don't think
like
they
that.
would really.
and one of the things I'd ask is just to go back and just double check all the tables, because I found a few that had articles cited that don't exist in the
I
code.
fixed the one already, it was see-through.
I want to change it in there,
Sure.
yes, no mechanical repair or services shall be permitted. That's pretty broad stroke of language there. Explain the intent behind that, please.
Okay, I'm sorry, what number is that?
Yes, right below.
No mechanical repair or servicing shall, again, that's from the code, the way it is now, it's sort of open there, it's not, no mechanical repair.
I think that was
So what do
geared
you-
more, I think it's geared more to like lawnmower repair and things that Barry's right, that it is kind of broad, it probably should be a little more specific.
I think we can just eliminate that.
Yeah, because how do you determine somebody who's doing it as a hobby versus somebody who's actually charging?
There's really no way to know.
I got a car lift in my garage. To work on my stuff, my old cars. I'm not making any money with it.
Right. And it's very
How
hard
would you know
to,
that I'm not making?
Yeah.
it's very hard to investigate what is an actual business and what's a hobby, because we don't go into people's houses, so that's a very good point.
So Barry, do you have, a lot of problems with people tearing apart cars in their drive or in their yards?
I think it's area dependent,
Yeah.
because we've got such a diverse landscape out here. So we got some congested, dense areas, and we got a lot of sprawling area. We got a lot of some small farms and bigger farms and stuff like that. And it really just depends on what quadrant of town you're in.
I think we get more complaints really about like litter and trash on properties than somebody, tinkering in their car or something. I mean, I don't see an issue if you're working on your car and changing the brakes or something, it's your property. Plus,
But I think the issue comes in is when you're tearing apart a car and you're spending 6 months doing it and you have parts all over.
Right.
And you're living in a tight neighborhood
Right.
as such, as opposed to having it in your backyard out of sight. And I agree that this S needs to be more clear as far as what it means, because it could mean pretty much anything at this point.
We could do one of two things. We could rewrite this, or we could move it to the article that's going to do with property maintenance. It could be a property maintenance issue. If you have a car taken apart in your yard for 6 months.
Could you preface it with the word commercial?
Yes.
I mean, that's a better way. to
That's
say
really
it.
what you're
It's a
looking for.
commercial enterprise versus.
Am I correct? This is just, this section applies only to home occupations.
Correct.
So initially, there'd have to be some evidence that the individual was running a business,
Correct.
right? So this would only apply if the person was running the business. I get it that sometimes that's a little difficult to tell, but maybe not that hard. I mean, I think that we had, I know historically we had one situation on the west side, we had some pretty chronic complaints about car repair. The allegation was, I think the individual said, no, I work on my car, I might work on my buddy's car. The neighbor seemed to think that there was enough turnover that it looked like maybe somebody was making some money. I suppose in that situation, I suppose we'd want to determine, is it a home occupation? Is this person actually running it as a business? If they're not running it, it's a tricky area.
Well, if it's a
We have
home
struggled with it.
occupation, not necessarily the occupation being repairing cars, but if your occupation is delivering pizzas out of a car that's a pizza car as such, and you want to change the oil, change the brakes in your driveway, would this apply, saying no mechanical repair for your individual car, for your business?
I think the word commercial would really help, no commercial.
I think,
Probably would help.
I put that in there. I think that there is something in here about auto repair must be allowed as a
I
home
was looking
occupation.
for it, I read it somewhere else in here.
Yeah, it's in here.
In the old code, it's actually listed like no vehicle repair or no lawnmower. I mean, in our old or existing code, it actually is laid out, you're not supposed to do that, but I think the word commercial, no commercial mechanical repair shows.
I think that is.
And I think might cover our bases there that a person definitely is not gonna be under suspect if they're working on their own, vehicle or their own lawnmower.
So if you go to prohibited home occupations, that's the table, it's 806. Automotive, truck, recreational vehicle, trailer, motorcycle, alternate, all of it. So all that as a business you can't do. So it would be, the only thing that would be what Mr. Scott said, is that if you have a business and you're working on the pizza repair or something, and you have two pizza cars, and you're working on one, and it stays out there. But you can't do automotive work as a business. You can do your own automotive, you can, do your
Work on your own.
renovate your car, but you can't. So I don't know what the commercial, maybe we should just eliminate that. I don't know.
I don't know, commercial might help, but it also, this is home occupation. This is not if you own another property that you're doing this work at. That definitely would have to be a commercial building. So I think commercial, because you're talking about home occupations, and this would not be allowed at all in that.
Yeah, this is saying, home occupation, no mechanical repair or servicing shall be permitted. It's real vague, it's in there today, so.
I think if I'm understanding what city council is interested in is allowing someone to do their own personal stuff and make it clear that when you cross the line of, I'm gonna hang a little sign out front on it, do commercial work, then that's what we're.
Or even pass the word to friends that you'll do it for a certain price.
Right.
That becomes a commercial activity.
When we work on that, you'll see something written up, that you can comment on that.
My favorite one was home occupation for a funeral home. That was my favorite. I like to do that kind of thing at their house.
That's the way it used to be done before. A lot of funeral homes, people live upstairs.
That's true.
Couple of questions on outdoor storage and display. Under, this is 800.4,
Can you give us a page number?
93. So under B, residential outdoor storage requirements. Number 1, outdoor storage of accessory recreational vehicles, boats, trailers, or commercial vehicles are allowed on driveways in the front yard and rear and side yards with minimum setbacks of 10 feet. So the next part's what gets kind of confusing. On corner lots, storage shall be behind the side building line facing the street. If it's a corner lot, don't they have two sides facing the street?
Yes.
That's correct, you have two streets.
So what does that corner shall be behind the side building line facing the street? So basically that says is that if you're going to the lot, it has to be at the building line, no matter what. So that recreational vehicle, if the building line is 50 feet, it would have to be 50 feet back. If the side lot line is 30 feet, it would have to be 30 feet off that line.
So does that apply to the front of the house, or does that apply to both sides of the house at the end of the corner lot?
Yeah, that should be a little more,
I think there should be some leniency on it, because now you just took away basically half of the person's yard.
For the corner lot. I'll rework that.
a little more specific.
Yeah. Yeah, we spent a little time on this.
Put something in there,
Pardon?
So put something in there that dictates the frontage of the house or the side street of the house.
So
Houses
it's
only
really-
have one
deal.
frontage street.
Okay, so maybe we just deal with, I think the issue was, if you can't see if you're in a corner, you know, if you're making a turn, you have a big camper park there. So I think that was the issue. I'll deal with it, and we'll call it some little more.
Another question on that same section was F, where semi-trailers are prohibited. Was that in, I didn't see that in the previous code.
That was something that came out of the planning commission.
Okay.
They didn't want
So
us-
did we, what drives that? I get it, and once again, the more,
I might be able
dense
to address
area.
that question actually.
Okay.
A few years ago, we had a situation, I'm not gonna name the street, but there was two neighbors lived next door to each other, residential area, pretty tight.
Might be the southeast part of town.
What's that?
Might be the southeast part of town.
No, actually, not too far from here,
Right.
actually. Gentleman brought home semi, and he had a habit of wanting to keep it running. And it made a lot of noise and a lot of fumes and that. And we had an individual come to one of the council meetings and prior to, I'm not sure if Judy or Mr. Cox is here, I can't remember. Remember the gentleman? who
I was, yes.
And it was quite a stir, you know, that it was noisy, it was making a lot of fumes and all that stuff. So, you know, that kind of stemmed from going back to that. So I'll take kind of credit on that one.
So this doesn't address that issue though. Because you can still bring your truck home and still, I mean, you can't let it idle because our noise ordinance prohibits that.
Right.
So, actually, I know somebody who is an over-road truck driver, lives in the community, and occasionally they don't have time to go drop their trailer, and they will back it up their driveway, and they've got enough lot, yard to do that stuff, and this, changes, and I don't know, I'm assuming there's other people, I know of a few others that bring trailers home. So why, I mean, just based off one person, we're making a rule and regulation to affect the entire community?
And actually, that wouldn't be addressing that. So you're off the hook. This is actually just talking about the trailer.
I know, that's
It's
what I'm
not
saying.
talking about the truck at
Well,
all.
that's the thing, because the trailer,
Yes,
what
that's
he's
what I'm
talking about
saying.
doesn't impact the trailer.
Well,
It's
I think
still-
it's just a
It's also talking about storage.
That's what I was just going to say, because I understood it, going through it, I thought it was about using those, buying a trailer as a storage unit to put in your yard. I thought that was the thought process behind the
Yeah,
semi-trailer.
it is partially, because we don't allow those
Right.
big trailers for a long period of time. I think, I don't know, I can't remember, it's been a while, but I think the issue was, they didn't mind you putting a
Shipping
tractor
container.
cart. Pardon me?
Shipping
Shipping,
container.
yeah, no, we do have regulations for those.
Yeah.
But we just didn't want,
Aesthetics.
semi-trailer park in a residential lot.
That's understandable. I don't want to penalize the guy that comes home for a week and parks his truck and then he's gonna be gone for another month or so.
We could.
That wouldn't be storage,
It's,
right?
well, I don't know, is there a definition that says, because I don't see a definition that says how many hours. We call out 72 consecutive hours for the vehicle camper potentially used for permanent or temporary
Residential,
residential purposes.
72 consecutive hours.
But we don't call out a timeline for a semi-trailer, and I'd hate to see somebody who maybe has a problematic neighbor or something says, hey, the truck's there again.
Right.
We can put it 72 hours on that too, if that's something.
Well, the big problem with that too is counting those 72 hours.
Right.
I mean, that could be, let's say the zoning administrator went out and said, hey, you know, this thing's been here 72 hours, and the individual says, well, no, it hasn't.
Right, I'm not trying to make your, more difficult you, I was just trying to,
No.
Mayor had a comment about, is it storage, and that's, my point is, there's nothing that says if it is or isn't. It just says you can't, store a trailer, and what do we consider storage?
Yeah, so if you say 72 hours and I pull it out of my driveway and back it in, is that clock started?
Right, that's true. I mean, that could have a lot of holes in it. So.
Yeah, I think with a lot of these things, is, you know, to cover every possibility, you could end up with an enormous code. Some of the stuff that's in here, well, as is happening in the code already, you don't realize it's a problem until the situation arises. So just to use that one for an example, if the city, in your example, a guy occasionally parks a semi, you know, if the city were to try to cite him, it would be incumbent upon the city to show that he's using it for storage, you know, as opposed to just parked it overnight. So there's layers of protection there, the common sense layers of protection, I guess. Having said that, we don't want to set people up to fail. I understand that too. So you want to cover as many possibilities as you can, but you can't cover everyone.
I guess my concern is right now we've got common sense people in the administration. 10 years from now, we may not. And if this is, you know, not changed, or somebody may interpret it differently, I guess is my.
Is it empty when one comes home typically? Could.
Yeah, it's an open trailer.
Is there,
So I mean, it says that they're not storing, this is under storage, so it's not really storing, I think it's, what is it, a closed trailer, somebody buys it and then just throws all the junk in it, right? I mean, I think he would.
well, that's one way to look at it. The other way is that you're just storing the trailer there, actual trailer, not necessarily storing anything in it.
Oh, I see.
You're just, you know, so is there, in our terms or definitions, is there something that this defines what outdoor storage is? Or, you know, because again, the question with this section is the trailer being stored there, or is it just being parked there for a temporary basis? Yeah, it's not a question if they're putting anything in it, just, you know, hey, my trucking business went out of business, so I've got these 5 trailers I'm storing in my backyard.
It is under storage, so it really is dealing with storage. You can't use the trailer as storage.
But can you
Regulations
store the trailer? And I think that's what this is saying.
It's store the trailer, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what Mr. Koch just said. Is it parked or is it stored? You know, that's where you gotta kind of, I know we're splitting hairs, but
If it's parked, it's moving around.
but what's your definition? How long does it have to
Be
be
parked in order to fall into that, that's very
Let
important.
me redefine that, you guys did something, you know.
That's a tricky one.
Right, and that's why, I mean, don't take this as we're you know, shooting holes, but
No, but this is.
I could just see somebody asking questions and I'd like to have an answer for them.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't have one right now.
Right.
So you had mentioned shipping containers a few minutes ago. What are you gonna do about the people that, what is the city going to do about the people who already have shipping containers in their residential lots?
Well, that's a very good question.
Because there's a bunch of them out there. And there's some of them that have actually been doors added to them and turned into sheds, if you will.
We have to look at the other chapter administrative of grandfather uses, I don't have that in front of me, but there are things that are permanent and continue.
Well, shipping containers were in our previous guidelines.
I don't even think we deal with shipping containers in this.
They're storage.
Storage,
Yeah, they're storage containers. I think they address them. in there.
So the question is, and I'll look at that, is what construction trailers, storage containers are permitted, and that was the question. Let's see, go to that section here, how we define that. And I need to go into the definitions and see what we're talking through. Service. Other service structures shall include but not limited to loading docks, dumpsters, electric transfers, utility vaults, other equipment, extra components. So it doesn't qualify as a service structure, let's see. Exterior components. I bet you it's in commercial, the shipping containers. So it might only allow shipping containers in the commercial, which is C, going up there on page 94.
Yeah, B district.
Yeah.
Commercial district.
Yeah.
But it says.
Now everything's coming on board as people are buying shipping containers and building houses.
Well, we're gonna deal with that when we get into residential districts and structure, dwellings and things like that. I don't think you want to allow that, but maybe you do. I'll have to look at, go into, shipping non-conforming uses. You may have to add something on that, I'll have to look at it. I don't have it in front of me.
You almost couldn't do it consistently.
Yeah, I mean, you could take the same storage container in two different scenarios. One could not look bad, and the other one could be sitting in another yard before.
Sure.
So, I don't
Once
know.
again, aesthetics.
Right.
Well, looking at that too, with the semis and shipping containers, I know a lot of them are used as basically large billboards. Do you have anything in the code that would, if we do allow trailers, semi-trailers or something about signage on that? Should we? I mean, right now it says nothing, so obviously, but if we adjust it so that there can be.
We had a large discussion on that, on advertising. We'll have to, when we go into the signage section, to deal with that, but for home occupations, we're allowing you to keep your business name on whatever you're doing. But are you saying that if you have a shipping container, that you put, Bob's Roofing on it, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I'm thinking of anything from, you got a semi-truck that's sitting there that's got anything from political signage to advertising or what?
Typically, I'll have to look, since we haven't gotten in the sign that's phase 2, is what we allow residential signs. Typically, you allow home occupation, you do allow you to have a sign for home occupation. But there are limits to what you can do residentially to put signs up, size-wise. So the question is, I'll have to look at the sign section, what do you want people to have signs? And don't you have an issue with that right now there? Is somebody, a business that has a sign up?
Well, they did have
It's
some.
right in the back now.
Yeah. They did, so.
Yeah, so,
We took care of that.
so right now, this doesn't deal with that. What
It was in the right of way, and it was blatantly, an issue, so we have that part resolved.
So, we talked a little bit about I'll call it the storage, temporary pods, whatever you want to call them, shipping containers, and if they be grandfathered or not. When you get into the agricultural end of things, I know we made a lot of progress on the chicken and bee and the other type of zoning language we had in there. So I noticed there's some setback on chicken coops and stuff like that. Is that something that's going to be enforced going forward? Or anybody that has something that may be, I think it's 15 feet as the setback for a chicken coop. Let's say they're 12 feet. Is that something that's going to be enforced, or are they going to be grandfathered in?
That's a very good question, because we really don't know everybody who's out there now
Right.
that has things in, and the new regulations come in. It's kind of hard to go out. I know I have one on Common Road I'm working with now, a neighbor dispute, and the chicken coop is close to the property line. And I actually did talk to the individual with the chicken coop that, move it over, but I don't believe he's done that yet. But
Some of these coops are pretty, I mean, they're established. They're part of the ground. I mean,
Sure.
there's posts in there. It's the structure and everything else. That I don't think you can really move them without completely dismantling them.
Right.
We talked about the moratorium. Did we ever do a moratorium on that? We talked
Of
about
the chickens?
Chickens, yes.
We did.
Yeah, I think that addresses some of the grandfather issue. But I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, we paused all the enforcement of the regulations until we got to this point. So,
We don't have that in the code. I mean, that would be something on, you know, we might have to go back into that non-conforming section. If that's something that's, that you want to do.
and would it be, under the non-conforming, would it be something that they can just show proof that it was there before a certain date?
That's a possibility. One thing that kind of comes to mind is once the regulations come in, all of a sudden we have a neighbor dispute like what I'm dealing with now. And then let's say one neighbor looks at the code and says, well, you're saying it's got to be X amount of feet off the line, and it's not. And that's been there for a long time. I mean, we're going to have to kind of sort through that.
I think one way to do it, I don't think you want to, you don't want to make it carte blanche, whoever has a chicken coop. I think maybe if there's an issue, you always can take it to the board of zoning appeals. But they don't meet the requirement, that's the board of zoning appeals look at. That would probably be a better way of doing
Probably
it.
the fairest way with due process.
Yeah. I think, you know, you want to be, if there's no problem, if no one complains, it can go on forever. But if there are complaints, if we have to take action, then I think PZA would be the thing to do it. That would be my recommendation.
So,
And that works out good until you get a new neighbor in, all of a sudden, doesn't like your beehive where it is.
Right.
And so what do you do? You say, well, this guy's had a beehive here for 20 years, he just moved in. Tough.
That's, unfortunately, it happens that way.
So with the addition of all these codes, we don't really have a grandfathering mechanism in place yet.
We do. We did that
Okay.
in phase one. Now, the non-conforming uses, I just don't have that in
Yeah.
front of me.
It seems like the last two issues were grandfathering issues.
Yeah, well, you
Yeah.
know, the beauty of non-conforming, if it's a structure, and it's been there, and we define that, I just don't have it.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at it. And actually, we ended up pretty much keeping our non-conforming the way it was. We made some minor changes to it, and that was it. So, but sometimes it's hard to say that, you know, a beehive is, you know, why can't you just move it? You know?
right, I'm looking at more like the structures, you know, that it's going to be detrimental to the building to try to move it.
Yeah.
And so, am I hearing like, they need to go for like a variance on it? Is that what you're saying, or like?
I don't know, if, we have to look at, if there's some examples, we can look at that. If you have a chicken coop, rather elaborate chicken coop, you know, that I think you can make a case that was their property.
I've seen some with automatic doors, and they're wired, they have
Yeah,
doors and
yeah.
heaters and everything.
I think
else.
that's a no-brainer, you can say that's their property. If it's just a little thing that could be moved, then.
Well, I think you made a great point about it going through BZA, going through the due process, allow the committee to make a decision and listen to both sides of the argument. And I know we're not making those decisions tonight, but as you think about it, my concern would be if I have a chicken coop, like I'm going to have a chicken coop. But anyway, if I had a chicken coop, and as was used as an example, a new neighbor comes and doesn't like where my chicken coop is, then we go to the BZA. Is there a fee to go to the BZA?
Unfortunately, there is.
So the thing to think about then is who would pay that fee? Why would I pay a fee because my neighbor is, my new neighbor is kind of upset? Why am I going to be forced to pay a fee to defend myself as such? So as you think about that process going through it, maybe there's something that, I don't know how it works out, and I'll let you figure that out. But I just, I like the going to the BZA. I don't like someone being forced to have to pay a fee because of something else. So just, throwing it out there.
Right now, just thinking about one way you can do it is that if it's a non-conforming issue, variance, then there's no fee. But we have to put that right now.
Well, yeah, whatever, however you
Yeah,
want to.
that's, I guess, I would agree, if we could have some sort of thought on that, and maybe bring something back to us with how that could work. And is there another possibility that maybe if somebody could check with the neighbors surrounding that, and if maybe the neighbors sign off on it, and then that checks the box for them, and it's kind of a done issue at that point.
Well, I think-
that one, because
Well, there could always be the new neighbor scenario. I mean, maybe you and I are neighbors now, and we get along fine, and then I sell out and get a new person in, and they're like, well, I don't like your chicken food. Yeah, so that is kind of true, that kind of creates a little,
Well, under that scenario, then, you know, if you have a couple people back up to you, you could get one new neighbor who could take you to BZA and you could win.
right,
You could get another new neighbor, have a different BZA board, and you could lose.
correct. It's,
So I don't, you're almost double jeopardy for the same issue.
Yeah, I don't know, let us take a
Yeah,
look at it, we
okay.
can talk to the law director also.
Are we talking about grandfather then? Is that what we're talking about? I mean, it may just strictly be a legal issue, because you make a good point. Depends on who's on the BZA. Depends on who's appointed people on the BZA. And you have a change in cast of characters, and somebody feels like the deck got stacked against them. I think as a practical matter, if it came in, let's assume this gets adopted, and somebody issues a complaint that says, wait a minute, this is contrary to our zoning. I think that today's protocol would be zoning would do their own investigation initially to determine, first of all, is it properly grandfathered from a legal standpoint, all right? Or does grandfather not apply in that situation? Probably, let's assume it does, then it would be incumbent upon the zoning, with the assistance of legal, to do some investigation, which may not be that difficult. Talking to a variety of neighbors, looking at the structure, reaching some kind of a conclusion that, yeah, it does appear, that the greater weight of the evidence seems to suggest that this was already here. Or, in that case, then we have to tell the neighbor, hey, we have no relief. We feel it's grandfathered in. Now, the neighbor has relief at that point in time, not to come here necessarily, but, to take the civil action on a nuisance basis, or allege that that the city's in error in saying that it's not in violation. If the flip side is if the city says we don't think you're grandfathered in, well then the city can proceed with enforcement. And now that landowner in that situation, and I don't know if I take it that far whether that becomes a civil remedy at that point in time. It probably is not a conditional use, so it's probably going to end up at the courthouse. Now, then, I guess we're only as good as our zoning department. It still has to do with personalities, but it's also, with the support of your law director. So I really think that those types of things are going to run into, I think that's really, because if we start doing chutes and ladders here and this and that, we're going to waive this fee and we're going to do that, I think you may be better off leaving it to the zoning department to determine did it exist or did it not.
Add to that, if you did it that way, they can appeal Barry's decision,
Oh, sure enough.
and then that can go to the board of zoning.
Yeah, okay. So then
I think, yeah, there's
Okay.
probably.
At least the threshold stuff starts here.
Yeah.
Well, talking about me personally, I would look at it and see if I determine whether a nuisance indeed existed, whether there was.
Well, it's a question if there,
Well,
well, it's not a nuisance issue, Barry. It's a question of whether or not it's a, not permitted use.
Right. But there is, like I said, there is part of the nuisance component too. Using drives it, using the neighbor, they're complaining about noise, waste, whatever, so. That's a tricky one.
You address that in your new code in section 6 on your chickens, which is noise, noxious odors, and lighting shall not be limited to the poultry property. Odors shall not be perceptible at the lot line, and noise shall not be perceptible at the lot line. Being closer than 15 feet is probably going to be difficult, I would guess, with that to do. So you might have some built-in other parts. If you're going to grandfather in, or you're going to grandfather past the noise and
They still have to maintain their structures.
yeah.
That's true.
Let us think about that. I think, we pretty much, we worked through this chicken issue. I think we even had somebody that asked that question. And I don't know what their response was. We said, well, at this point, we have to meet these regulations. But I can see the case where you have rather elaborate one. But,
Yeah, if you just get back to us on something, I don't want to keep stretching this.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything pressing they want to ask, or do you want to do this through email as far as asking questions, getting answers back? Okay.
what section were we looking at? I can go to that. I want to come make a note.
For the ag.
Yeah.
For the ag.
So it had to be all, only in the ag part there. So we have some other questions on the ag we want to go over.
Okay. Yeah, do you have anything else you want to go through, or?
If you have any other questions, I was just gonna make our way to the ag, and I can go over, the questions that, Sharon Goodwin had about, she approaches after the planning commission. So first, making my way to the agricultural. I guess since we're, if you know, we can backtrack again. Let's make a note of what we just talked about here. Okay. Want to go to the chair?
Please.
If you go to page 129, and some of this is already regulations now. Under site requirements, horses, ponies, mules, and donkeys. There were a couple things that she mentioned, that the one thing was that referencing no minimum number of horses and grain fed. This should be removed only in very unique cases where horses thrive on just being grain fed and no limited acreage. And that is under site requirements A, horses in part 2, which is horses shall be. And there are a couple other changes she suggested in that paragraph. Is that the last two sentences deal with for each non-grain fed horses over 2, at least 1.5 acres of pasture per horses required. And then there is no minimum limit of grain fed horses. And I believe you just wanted the last sentence you think it should, or the last 2 sentences you think should be out.
I believe the last sentence,
Okay.
just feeding grain for horses is not in the best interest. Causes a lot of digestive problems and rare exceptions. They need grass, they need hay, they need to be able to move around. So if you have unlimited number of horses to be able to be kept on that size lot, just by feeding them grain, it's not really in the best interest of the animal.
So she's recommending that last sentence be eliminated. We have no problem with that, so it's up to you. That's what we're doing. And then she had other questions about, and this is a little bit more complicated. I understand what she's talking about is that we say that you have to have 2 acres for both horses, ponies, mules, and donkeys, and then also other hoofed animals. We don't say that, but and the question came up is that if you have 2 acres and you have a house and a swimming pool and a large garage, now you have less than 2 acres for that horse. And that's the way it says. So it's just a lot. It's 2 acres, horses, but we're not subtracting the house, the garage, the swimming pool, things like that. And she felt that it should be 2 acres for the horses, not.
The fenced in area, the allotted area for the horse.
So that's okay with us, but you have to remember now is that if you have 2 acres, you have to subtract the house of those things out. So you're gonna have to have more than 2 acres to have a horse. So you just need to.
So the people would be, would be another grandfather issue then, it sounds like.
And then also saying that sentence would also be added, other hoofed animals, that you'd have to have 2 acres. We tried to, when we went through this, we tried to go back to Ohio Revised Code for how you, is one of the complaints what we had there, so we simplified it. And simplifying it, we just tried to keep setbacks. But in horses, we kept it to 2 acres. So it's really up to you. Is there anything, does that handle everything?
Yes, thank you.
Would it be like 2 acres of pasture? Because you could have 3 acres and 1 acre dedicated to house and stuff, another acre dedicated to woods.
Yeah, I don't know, go ahead.
And that could be complicated. I'm not gonna name anything, but there's a particular residence that I can think of, I don't know, none at all. But a good portion of the property seems to be taken up by everything but area for the animals. So I guess if you have larger acreage, your animals can move around. So it's a little less complicated. But on a smaller acreage like 2, if you're taking up most of that land with other than pasture or room for them, so I don't know if it would be easier to make like a percentage, like if you have 2 acres, but 3/4 of that has to be accessible to the animal. Or, I mean, I don't know how complicated it could get, but I just think if you have 2 acres and you have 1.5 of it doing something else besides the room for the 2 horses.
That's what I'm saying, have 2 acres of pasture. You know, if you're having 2 acres of pasture, you probably need to have a minimum of 3 for your other stuff, for your house and things like that. But 2 acres have to be dedicated for the animal to be born free.
Right, or if you have 2 acres and just at least 1.5 of that acre, 1.5 of that parcel would be in half of it up for your residence or.
Would it fall under the Ohio Revised Code that it would give a minimum of acreage? And so if you're not following the revised code, then you wouldn't be following it if you had less than 2 acres.
It goes to the Ohio Revised Code. All we had was setbacks.
I'm saying if your Ohio Revised Code says you have to have a minimum of 2 acres for the horse, which would be pasture, then that would clear that out. You wouldn't be able to by the Ohio Revised Code.
I'd have to go with the Ohio Revised Code. We had the sections in here because we want people to go to those sections. I'd have to look at that. I did something simple just based on that. I just said, raising medicines for other hoofed animals requires at least 2 acres excluding the main dwelling and associated accessory buildings and structures. So, I don't know if that's too simplified. It doesn't, it just basically, it would require the zoning department to say, okay, this is your property, this is where your house is, and now you have to, the remainder has to be 2 acres.
Yeah, I think if this is the Ohio Revised Code, it sounds like that's exactly what we should follow.
Yeah.
It sounds.
And that's what
like it's right
we're
there.
supposed to follow. In the code, that's what it says. We only had setbacks, except for horses, we kept that in, because everybody wanted it in. So I will go through that and double check that. I just don't know.
I agree with taking that one sentence out about grain-fed horses. It doesn't make sense. I'm a little more concerned about putting acreage requirements on horses. I have 2 miniature horses. There are dogs bigger than the 2 miniature horses. 2 acres or 1.5 acres for each one of those isn't quite the same as for big horses. Most horses, if they're grain fed, even if they're grain fed, if people don't have enough physical space for them to eat, because eating and running free and wild in the pasture are 2 different things, they feed hay. Most people feed hay year round, because it's hard to grow enough hay or grow enough pasture to feed horses when we've got dry spells and everything. The important thing is that they do have room to run around, but it's difficult to set a specific amount of pasture. My 2 minis would be fine on 1 acre. I have more than that, and they love it, but it also depends on what you're doing with them. If you're taking them out and driving them every day, they're getting plenty of exercise. If you're going out and riding every day, they're getting plenty of exercise. there's so many variables, it makes it really difficult to have one blanket rule. I think part of it can be handled by the stuff that says, you know, you don't want to be a nuisance to your next door neighbor. You get 12 horses crowded on an acre, you're gonna be a nuisance to your next door neighbor. So that can handle some of what a problem could be.
I'll look at your honor code.
It doesn't show acreage, I looked it up.
Does it say?
No, it just says to have a clean and safe environment promotes the health, welfare, and performance of equines.
You know, I'll try to work on it. I'm not an expert in horses.
Would there be some sort of code about, call it animal cruelty, but I mean, if you don't have room for the
Yeah.
horses and they're overstacked, there's gotta be code out there that exists for that already.
Yeah, the humane code would definitely have a lot of stuff in it.
I think in my 21 years, I've only seen one instance of a horse situation. That there was a problem, and the person that had the horse had like hoarding of other animals, and we didn't have the Humane Society involved and all that. That's only one instance in 21 years, so I don't think it's as dire of a situation as it might sound.
This is a pretty standard 2 acres, you know, I've seen codes I've looked at before, it's pretty much the same, so that's why. And I understand with the small horses, you know, I think that's why you do have a zoning administrator to be able to make decisions in the field, you know, and document it. So, but we'll take a look at it just to see if I just wanted you to understand, we don't have a problem with doing what they're saying is that taking a house and it's getting the wording right is one thing. But if you're okay with that, if you agree in the premises of that we can make those changes, it's just that, just be aware that if you do have 2 acres and your horses, you may not conform it. That's it. So, do you want us to go ahead and take a look at that or not?
I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know when the public gets to speak. I do have a question before we get through the agriculture.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so under the apiary, it says that take place on a parcel of property of at least 1/4 of an acre. But then on page 131, but then if you look at the agricultural land graph, it says that the only 2 that they have are less than 2 acres. And so that's saying that I would be allowed, or whoever, to grow fruits and vegetables. But then I have to follow agriculture, have 2 acres. So the graph is saying that I have to have 2, but the definition under 4 is saying that I could have 1/4. Same for chickens. The chickens don't, under poultry, it does not designate a lot size. However, per that graph, you have to have 2 acres. So that does not.
Not necessarily, because we went over this before.
Okay.
Is that if you have right now you can do it in CD, R1, R2, and B1. If you have a lot of record that's less than, the R2 is, what's the minimum size for R2?
Is, I think it goes down to a half.
Half
I
acre.
don't have a chart.
So if you have a lot of record that's existed before, this is where you get into non-conforming, is you can still do that, you just have to meet setbacks. So you can do, like there what you're talking about is that you have less than 2 acres and you have your beekeeper.
I don't, but I guess if you look at the graph, it says on lots with a platted
Where-
subdivision
Okay, where are you at?
on page 131
Okay,
of the agricultural land use graph.
okay.
So at the top it says on lots within a platted subdivision, and then it shows you what's permitted. And under less than 2 acres, it shows permitted is growing of fruits. Then it says on lots within a platted subdivision of 2 acres, that's where apiculture and poultry is falling. So for me, it seems as if it's saying, up here I can, but down here I can't unless I have 2 acres.
Lots with platted subdivision, less than 2 acres on lots and plats, within the plat subdivision, so we can grade them. And this table, the only thing we added to this table was acre.
B1.
B1 acre area and beekeeping, or, chickens. The rest is the same.
I think that was some of the issue, the original method of the moratorium, was the graph. And maybe there's some text that needs added in that first section, because I understand what Emily's saying is, we've added the ability to do it in the text up above, but when you look at the graph doesn't reflect, or the table doesn't reflect what the text up above says.
So let me look at the graph again and look at, maybe we take that. I think there were separations because originally maybe, I don't know the reasons why, but a platted subdivision would be different than unplatted subdivision.
Correct.
We can look at it. That is something we can make some minor changes to those standards.
Because currently, it looks like you have to have 2 acres to have any chickens at all per this graph, because it doesn't designate outside.
That's not what we need.
Yeah.
In one of the earlier revisions, there were a couple of sentences that are not in this one. Under the keeping of poultry is permitted in accordance with the following requirements. Takes place in CD, R1, R2, and B1. Take place on a parcel or property of at least 1/4 acre. That's not in there now. I don't know what that would.
Chickens are you talking about?
Yes.
I think the commission didn't want 1/4 acre, and that's why, so we just did it by zoning.
Okay.
So that's the reason why it's not.
So it goes back to needing 2 acres, which.
No, if you're in an R2 zoning district and you have less than 2 acres,
The graph doesn't.
yeah, the graph doesn't, but what it's supposed to be is that if you're allowed to do it in these zoning districts, no matter what size lot you have, for chickens
Okay.
and bees. And so, I had to make a change to the table.
So the section on chickens that are in there, well, actually poultry, should it then say notwithstanding any other regulations, keeping with poultry is permitted in accordance with the following requirements? In other words, ignore the table, is that what you just said?
Maybe, I have to think about this, maybe we don't need that table.
I kind of agree with you, why have platted and
Yeah.
unplatted?
Yeah.
So-
Let me take a look at that. We may not need, or we may need just a simplified table. Yeah, we just carried the table over because it was in. But maybe we don't need a table.
That's
I think
I think the platted and unplatted has caused a lot of confusion for years. It really has.
Okay. All right, well, we'll take a look at that and see what we want to do. This is a good time to talk about that. Minor changes we deal with, so.
We can see if there's any additional public comment, and we can, would we do a continuance on this?
Yeah.
So we do a continuance on the public hearing to another date.
Yeah.
Next council meeting or?
Yeah, I can do.
Do you think the next council meeting is in enough time, or you want to push it out for 2?
If I want to,
These are.
if it's enough time for you.
So we'll go to the
When
next
is
council,
next council?
18th,
2
I
weeks.
think?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay.
Yeah, the 18th.
That give you enough time, Fred?
Yeah. that's-
Is that,
these are-
do we have to advertise again? Is that?
It's
Okay.
not like you have to support a continuance in that.
Okay.
I mean, we can make sure it's on the website and that, just so people understand.
Terry?
I had a couple questions. I found it a little bit confusing to go through this because the first page of this says that the changes are highlighted in yellow, and a lot of the changes are not highlighted in yellow, and there's more than you think. I think the things that are highlighted in yellow are the changes between the second last and the last P and Z meeting. And all the other ones are still.
Yeah, that copy that was sent, I prepared that right after the planning commission meeting and had all the yellow. There's a master copy, this doesn't have any yellow, but this new one will have yellow in it. It's just, when we talked about that, there's just so many little changes, it's hard to, we're working through all these issues, and it gets confusing when we see a lot of changes. So I guess as you go through it, we have copies of old ones, but we're trying to make these changes to make this acceptable. But again, we're not making a lot of changes, but they're little changes like this.
I think that was the concern. I expressed the same concern that you're referring back to the one from, I think it was 2019 to now. That was the last revision, if I remember right, correct?
The agriculture?
No, to the zoning code in general, I think it was 2019.
Yeah, there was
Amendments.
basically amendments.
Yeah.
Right.
It's still pretty much a carryover from township days, but.
So yeah, if you go back to that one and that's what you're using as your guide versus the stuff that we've been given, there's a lot of stuff that's changed. And I understand what you're saying. Originally, when this would have been March, April, May, when we got that, there was a lot of markups there, but those didn't carry forward. So it's a lot of stuff gets missed.
What I tried to do the last time when we had these amendments, and I'll go through, is you see that as it exists today, I crossed out things. The bad part about that is when they're crossed out, that doesn't mean they're out of the document, they might be moved. And so when you show all those changes, it really gets sometimes more confusing. I'll try to go through this and say, this has been changed. You at least maybe put a highlight, and I'll do it in the PDF and say, this is rewritten, or this, maybe we'll have a code, rewritten, removed, changed. I think that's the easiest way to do it. And I don't want to say trust us, but it's really hard when we go in there and move things around and to be, we've been taking our time. Article has taken longer than I thought it would take. Because we started this February.
Yeah.
And so we've taken our time and tried to make those changes. And I told the mayor this in there is that one good thing about doing this incrementally, if we do make a mistake, we're going to revisit a lot of these things and move them and make it correct. That's the deal. So we have that opportunity again. So, but we'll try to make it easier for you in this new version that Barry has taken last week, because I looked at it too, and I noticed that some of the yellows still maybe that was prior to it. But at least now we'll go through it, the version you have. It'll show all the changes we're talking about now. You'll see that. And I'll try to somehow put what we're changing prior to that. There have been a lot of changes.
I just don't want to wear you out. That's all I'm thinking. I mean, we want to catch things. It's a living document. We know that. It's so, and oftentimes you catch them when they come up. And if something comes up that is inconsistent with the intent, we revise again, as we go along. So we've got a couple layers of checks and balances on this thing, I think.
Yeah,
We got to be careful we don't get so bogged down.
Right.
This just doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's sometimes we have to be careful too, not being bogged down by little things that. That's why you have a zoning administrator to interpret things. We do say he can interpret things, and because it's not everything's not black and white, unfortunately. So,
And this has been good dialogue. I don't mean to suggest it hasn't. Everybody took a hard look. It's been good.
Thank you.
Audience as well.
So we'll go ahead and make those changes, if nothing else, and we'll get a copy next week.
Let's do a digital copy and then I'll make hard copies.
Yeah, digital will be helpful.
Yeah, digital works, yeah. And unfortunately, you can't, I'm not sending out the Word document, so you can't see those changes. The Word document, if it's 40 pages now, it end up being 120 pages. It's easier to go this way, and we can discuss it as we go through, I think.
All right, one last comment, and then we'll
Yeah,
pause
on
it.
the home occupation stuff. On page 98. Just kind of general on the home occupation, I still have concerns about the table that splits up occupations that seem to have an impact on the neighborhood and don't, and
Yeah, we talked about this, Terry.
That on page 98, number 4, near the top, businesses, this is what you have to do. Businesses conducted within dwelling or in an accessory structure. But then if you look at page 100, F, the residence may be the base of operation for the business, but the conduct of any phase of the trade on the property shall be prohibited. That confused me.
Residents may be for this operation of business, trade on property. I think what the code is saying, and this is carried on, is that you really, you could build the widget, but you shouldn't be selling that widget.
Okay.
I think you mentioned something about knitting or something like that, or?
That's one of them.
Yeah. And those decisions are gonna have to be made, by the zoning department, is that you don't wanna, you have services, you have home businesses, and you have home loans.
Right, you don't want a retail business,
Yeah,
right?
you don't want,
Residential.
and the idea is not to have people coming up like a 365-day,
Yard sale.
yard sale.
Yeah.
Well, that's the issue.
Yeah.
And I think if you're selling something that's not, that you have a few people coming over, that's not a big deal.
Yeah, the class A says no more than 5
Yeah.
client contacts in the home per week.
So the idea of home occupations is you can do the home occupation, but you cannot cause problems in the neighborhood. That's the issue. And so if you have too many people coming over, if you have, it causes problems. So we want you to be able to do your home occupation, but it can't become a nuisance.
And quite honestly, it's 4 questions right here. So I'm gonna email. But you know how long it takes them.
So I guess what we're gonna do at this point, we will continue our public hearing until 6 PM on September 18th.
On September 18th,
Yes, that's the next meeting, I believe, September 18th.
those changes to next week.
Perfect.
And then from there, if you're satisfied with that, I don't know what your schedule is for approval, whether you can improve it after that, or wait for next meeting.
Yeah, we'll get council's desire.
I am concerned on my schedule, we have a lot of work ahead, and I just need to keep the ball rolling, that's all, moving forward, that's my concern.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you guys ready to move on to committee meetings?
Yes.
All right, we're gonna start with our finance committee meeting. Mr. Cox?
Thank you. We will open the finance committee at 7:34 PM. You may think it's AM, but it's PM still. Resolution number 24R57, a resolution ratifying a 3-year legal agreement between the city of Town Franklin and local 2885 of the International Association of Firefighters, AFL-CIO, CLC, IAA, FF, union, and declaring an emergency. I understand that we may want to take time on this. Yes.
Anybody want to take time on this?
No? Discussion, comments, questions?
Yeah, I can speak to it, maybe that'll help.
Okay.
This was, I'll call it a pleasant surprise that the conversations were accelerated with fire. In fact, we haven't even had our first sit down from the union standpoint. And we're into like the 3rd or 4th one with the service department. You might recall that 3 years ago, the police came to us before we reached the table and said, listen, this is kind of what we like, and we've got other things we'll ask for if we negotiate, but this is really what we're after. And we were able to put a proposal, a tentative agreement together, like you see attached to this one, with the police very quickly. And so that's what happened 3 years ago. This time around, the same thing happened with the police. And as we have discussed, they had a number of issues they could have brought to the table. The primary issue from the city's perspective, and we've been talking about this, is the disparity in pay grades, the pay rates, and how our annuals compare with competing agencies, and the difficulties in attraction and retention of our public safety people. Initially, we thought that the disparity in wages was more significant with the police than it was with the fire. And that's the information that we talked to you about. And so to bring the police up to basically a par with what similar communities were making so we could attract and retain, the idea of the $6,000 equity increase and then the 3% raises, a reopener on our health insurance to see what happens there, police were in favor of that. As we began to prepare for the fire, and we got some comparables from our labor attorney, we learned that we were in a very similar circumstance with fire. The average, let me see, of about 20 different departments in Summit County is came out to, let me tell this person I can't talk, was $79,000 for the base pay and the with benefits, et cetera. So that's the number that we're comparing. New Franklin, that's at $79,158. New Franklin is at $74,570. So about $5,000 less. We are right now, Norton is at $80,398. So we're about $6,000 less than Norton. Copley's at 83. Green is at 88. And as mentioned, we were at 74. So we saw that we had some concern that when we talked about police, well, you know, oftentimes police and fire want to get the same things. And initially we thought, and so does service, I can assure you, but the comparables for service are much more, we're closer to the average, close to the average on service than we are the other two. We didn't realize we had the disparity with fire that we did. And with that in mind, we started those same kind of expedited discussions. It was suggested to us that if we can resolve those things similar to what fire did, what police did, we don't have to put any other issues on the table. We're okay with the reopener. And if we are comfortable with that. All of this goes against a backdrop, and we can open negotiations and go through the whole process with them. But the advice we're getting is that if we end up in fact finding what we've done for the police, and we have the same disparity, the same basic disparity with similar departments, we're probably not going to be successful at fact finding, number one. And then number two, not just that, but we want to do the right thing by them. And attraction and promotions, a big deal. Is it as big a deal with police? You just have to have a debate with that. Okay, but it's still a big deal. So this happened rather suddenly. I didn't know they'd be interested. They were. If you want to do what we did with police, we can take all the other issues off the table. Our management, the chief and assistant chief, we're in accord, as is our labor attorney, and they and the union has agreed, as indicated by the proposal. So I think it's a good thing. I think it's consistent with what we'd end up with anyway. But boy, there's a level of camaraderie, just goodwill that when we're able to do things like this with these departments, and that's been expressed, and it's been expressed to me to share that with council as well. which is also important. So that's why you got it kind of quickly, but it kind of happened quickly.
So in the fire world, are they seeing the same pressures that they're seeing on the police side of things, where other communities are actively trying to poach officers from neighboring communities? I know we had heard that was actively going on in the police side of things, as well as the number of candidates in academies that has drastically dropped. So your pool of potential hires is almost non-existent, and you're stuck with either an existing workforce or trying to retain your existing workforce. So is that the same thing that you're seeing on the fire end of the operation?
Not necessarily the poaching to the degree, but in terms of the attraction part of it, and the individuals who are even choosing to enter into fire service, the same as police. So it's expressed from that standpoint that we're not getting the applications that we would have at other times.
So one question I had in here, and you'd be able to answer this question. There's a clause where it mentions a certain percentage differential between the various ranks. And if you always do a percentage COLA, that's a non-issue. If you do a lump sum COLA, that becomes an issue. So has New Franklin ever done lump sum COLAs versus a percentage?
When you say a lump sum COLA, you're talking about a percentage increase, like the
So you could
3%?
get, no, that'd be a percentage COLA.
Yeah,
So everybody gets, say, 3%.
yeah.
But you could say that everybody's getting $1 an hour raise. Well, now you skew the percentage differences between different ranks.
I don't know that we have done that in the past. It was their suggestion it came up, a question about whether or not this equity increase, the blanket equity increase, would adversely impact the rank differential. And then they took a look and said that it would not. And I guess they decided to include that in there just to restate that fact. I don't know that my experience has been that we've either done equity increases or we've done just a lump sum stipend, or we've just done the percentage increases.
Other questions, comments? I apologize for speaking ahead. I thought there was some taking time on this.
That explanation helps.
Okay. Are we comfortable waiving a 3 on this?
I
Okay. Then we will ask to waive the 3. And I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. We are so lucky in New Franklin with the people we have working for us, whether it's police, fire, service administration, especially police and fire. They're dealing with people a lot of times not in the best of situations for that individual person, and we constantly hear how our people have treated the citizens with respect and dignity, made them feel as comfortable as possible as they're going through whatever the situation is. And that's a reflection of the leadership within our departments. It's a reflection of the amount of time people are with the city of New Franklin, and to be able to do things such as this, where is quickly accepted by our unions, because they want to be here. They want to be part of this community. They want to stay here, and they just provide a great service. And I know everybody knows it, but sometimes you just have to say it again.
Well said.
I agree, very well said. May I add something now?
No, I'm moving on.
No. You always wait for me. You get
Yes,
spoiled.
go ahead.
I think service deserves that too. I hear so many
Yes,
comments on our
absolutely.
guys when they're out on the roads and stuff and doing favors I shouldn't say favors, services for the community. They are just as great as police and fire. I
Absolutely.
can say all the guys are.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so yes, waive the 3 on this. Then we'll move on to Resolution 24R58, a resolution creating a separate fund for the Manchester Road Sewer Project for for the one-time Strategic Community Investments Grant and authorizing appropriations to the Manchester Road Sewer Project Fund, Fund 2056, in the amount of $3,800,000 and declaring an emergency. And this is just a basically administrative thing where we have to set up this account to receive the funds and to spend the funds, correct?
Yes.
All right. Questions, comments? Wave to 3. Closing the Finance Committee meeting at 7:46.
All right, we'd like to go to Laws and Ordinance Committee, Mr. Wolf.
I'd like to open the Laws and Ordinance Committee meeting at 7:45 p.m. We have ordinance number 24007, an ordinance to amend Articles 8 and 14 of the New Franklin zoning code. So I thought for about the next hour, we'll just go through 8 and 14.
I think that's a great idea.
You know,
I really appreciate that.
No, I'd like to ask for more time
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Is that a continue? So we say continue, so would that be good? Okay. That's it for the laws of the order. I will close this committee meeting at 7:46 p.m.
All right, I'd like to call to order the City of New Franklin Council meeting. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kelly, could you call roll, please?
Mr. Cox?
Present.
Mr. Schaefer?
Present.
Mrs. Jones?
present.
Mr. Powell?
Present.
Mr. Stiles?
Present.
Mr. Wolf?
Present.
Mr. Almond?
Present.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes for the regularly scheduled meeting of August 21st, 2024.
Second?
Kelly, we have a first and a second.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
All right, next we're going to move on to the public comment section. Please keep your comments addressed to council under 4 minutes, please. Any public comments? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comments. Takes us into our first reading, Resolution 24R57. Kelly?
A resolution ratifying a 3-year labor agreement between the City of New Franklin and Local 2885 of the International Association of Firefighters, AFL-CIO, CLC, IAFF Union, and declaring an emergency.
This resolution is assigned to the Finance Committee. We move to waive the 3 readings on Resolution 24R57.
Second.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
We move to adopt Resolution 24R57.
Second?
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Resolution passes 7-0. Resolution 24R58, Kelly?
A resolution creating a separate fund for the Manchester Road Sewer Project for the one-time Community Investments Grant and authorizing appropriations to the Manchester Road Sewer Project Fund, Fund 2056, in the amount of $3,800,000 and declaring an emergency.
This resolution is assigned to the Finance Committee. We move to waive the 3 readings on Resolution 24R58.
Second?
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
We move to adopt Resolution 24R58.
Second?
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Resolution passes 7-0. Ordinance 24007, Kelly?
An ordinance to amend Articles 8 and 14 of the New Franklin zoning code.
This was brought to the Laws and Ordinances Committee, and I would like to request a continuance. Is that right?
Time is requested and time is granted. All right, that closes out our legislation. Our favorite part of the council meeting, mayor's report.
Thank you. First of all, We will be taking a tour of Melody Village to view stormwater issues up there tomorrow. I think Ward 4 Council, Mr. Wolf, is going to be joining us. We know, we have these 100-year rains 3 times a year now. And we've known there's problems up there when we get the heavy rains. This is really, we're not the only city, municipality that's dealing with these issues. There's a whole lot of gray area in terms of what can a city do, what is the city required to do. What are our rights, what are our responsibilities. You can't go out and be a volunteer for some, if not for all. But we do want to look if there's any common remedies out there that we can employ. So first step first, we've cataloged the addresses who indicated to us that they had significant issues with the last heavy rain. We're going to take a look and we'll continue that conversation. Keep council advised of what we learn and what possible remedies there might be for us. Music night, successful Soultown Motown Music Night. We had over 200 people out there, and really nice show. And universally, I asked as many as I could, and they want to bring this group back. They did a really nice job. So that's the kind of the events that we were dreaming of when we entered these agreements and made the improvements out there that we've been able to make. On that note, Opus 216 will be there next Tuesday. This is a string quartet, or sometimes a quintet, depends on how many they bring, and they are exceptional. And it's everything from Beethoven to the Beatles. These folks perform nationally, and they're really good. So do yourself a favor and come on out next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. That's our final music night. I got a letter from the Daughters of the American Revolution. And in commemoration of the 237th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution, Constitution Week has declared each year, this year from September 17th to the 23rd. Bells Across America is an integral part of Constitution Week, and it involves ringing bells at 4 p.m. on September 15th. I do not know why, but they're doing it on Sunday, and this is going to happen out at Lake Anna in their gazebo at 4 o'clock on Sunday the 15th. So that would be not this Sunday, but the following Sunday. So if you can be around, good. They've asked for a public proclamation, which I'll put together for them in honor of their hard work in commemorating the Daughters of the American Revolution. They're still alive and kicking. All right, let's see. This coming Tuesday at 10:30 will be the groundbreaking for the Portage Lakes Visitor Center. Really huge deal. So the public's invited, 10:30 a.m. Tuesday. And I am advised that they hope to have that up by this coming summer. Yeah, I know.
That is terrific.
Yeah. And things are going well with the sewer. They're going to be able to direct the flow to Zelleray, so that's on board. We have pretty significant federal grant money, almost $1 million, to use towards that, and we're having those discussions. Everything happened very quickly because they want this built, and they had to have backup plans in the event the flow wasn't going to be accepted, and they were able to pivot and direct their plans that way. They're bringing water there as well. So that water will come from Aqua, but everything has to still be ironed out. And so they'll have the sewer and the water at that visitor center.
Isn't there already water there?
Yeah, plenty of it.
Yeah.
Not that kind. So anyway, all of that is we're still in discussions. We're trying to figure out how this grant money is used. And we're also talking about the possibilities of sewer and water. We know at one time St. Luke's was interested, and I've had some discussions with them. There's a little bit of transition going on over there, so to get the right people to the table is we're working on. And also the Tudor Event Center. I'm meeting with those folks tomorrow. to see what kind of tie-in we can do there as well. So it would really be nice to get that event center, sewer and water to our event center.
What time is the groundbreaking?
I'm sorry?
What time is it?
10:30.
10:30?
10:30 on Tuesday,
The
And,
10th?
the 10th.
and that's down by the beach?
Yes. That'd probably be up on the top of the hill, I think. Yeah, right above the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so exciting. I am thrilled.
Yeah.
Aren't
okay,
you?
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
this
is great.
has been a beautiful thing for us. It's gonna be great for the community, without
I
a doubt.
think it will be too.
Speaking of, and Mr. Kotz, it's almost like you did a preview for me, because I just got this news today. Our EMS STEMI team received the Certificate of Achievement for the Outstanding Performance and Recognition for the month of August. And I wrote about this today, but the Summa Health STEMI team, and that's an ST-Elevation Myocardial Infarction team, is dedicated to providing rapid and effective care for patients experiencing severe heart attacks. A STEMI is a heart attack is a severe type that occurs when one of the coronary arteries is completely blocked. Widowmaker. The blockage prevents oxygen flow, leads to extensive damage. Prompt treatment is crucial to restore that blood flow. The STEMI team has a well-coordinated approach to handling these emergencies, and they work closely with local EMS squads. And what they call is the door to balloon time. How quickly can they get from our EMS at the scene, diagnosing the issue, realizing it's of this nature. They contact the hospital. The hospital is already working before our guys are in transport. Many of you know how this works. And then once a month, there's an award for the outstanding performance based upon the time frame that the unit responded. And this month it was our fire EMS guys, led by Lieutenant Rich Huggins, and assisted by EMT paramedics Stephen Cook, Nate Weaver, and Sean Roherty. So again, just more accolades for our fire department and lives being saved out there. So we wanted to acknowledge them as well.
And that's not the first time.
It is not the first time.
They've won this award numerous times.
Yes, yes,
And this time they did it in 58 minutes.
yes,
From the
Wow.
house to,
Yeah. yeah.
we're good.
It's incredible.
That's
Yeah.
a lifesaver.
Yeah, lifesavers.
Yeah, it really is. You don't realize that when you're saying it, you're talking about it, and then all of a sudden you realize that is the sweetness.
All right. Let's see. Boring stuff. Form fire. Tackle your form fire and get that in so we can shop the health insurance and try to see if we can save some money there. And then I wanted to mention, and I think Mrs. Jones, you might have been the first to bring it to my attention, but the passing of Robert Elmer Lee, Bob Lee. And the city did send a floral array. Bob was he was in the inaugural city council there, and he served 2 terms, and just a wonderful gentleman and a real asset. His obituary indicates he retired from Firestone after 38 years as the in-house company litigation expert witness for commercial truck rim legal suits. He was 93 at the time of his death. He was born in 1930, married his sweetheart Doris Hiller in 1953, raised all 4 of his boys here in New Franklin. And it's good to note the godly values he instilled in their home included love, compassion, service, and integrity. And you know, that's really what it's easy to say nice things about somebody, but that's really who this guy was. If you had the pleasure of knowing Bob Lee, that's what he exemplified. He is predeceased by his wife, but his sons Robert, Andrew, Brian, and Ron survive him, and numerous grandchildren. So we want to note with gratitude the service of Bob Lee, and may he rest in peace and his family be comforted. And that's all I have. I'm going to leave it to Mr. Powell to talk about Touch a Truck. How that went.
Yeah, we're not going to have a finance report since our finance director is not here tonight. Any old business?
I want to mention the farmer's market. We only have a few more weeks, so we want all of you to turn out. We've really been pleased with the progress, and the vegetables are terrific. I take something home every night. It's scrumptious. What do you think about it? You come to almost every time. We appreciate that.
And the popcorn is excellent.
Thank you.
Get out some free popcorn.
I think it's pretty good too. What can I say? Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to touch on the toucher truck. Last weekend, we had a bunch of our equipment out. We had police, fire, we had a bunch of service guys out there, ODNR, state troopers. For the weather, we had a pretty good turnout. And to kind of echo on your comment, not just police and fire, but our service department, everybody's very appreciated. Kids light up when they see everything. It's a great event. Thanks to everybody who helped put this together. And hopefully we'll have another one next year. Any other old business?
I have one more thing that would be old business too. And I mention it, I try to mention it every meeting because it's so important. Barberton Ministries, if you donate to them, they help so many people in our community and in others. But if you donate to them, they can buy supplies, food, whatever is needed. It's such a lower rate than we can. But it's one of the best organizations around. They really help a lot of people in all the communities around. And Doris is just terrific.
Closing out old business, any new business? Seeing none, we'll go back to public comments. Any comments on anything discussed tonight?
I have a question. The visitor center that's going to be built, is that going to be staffed? Did they indicate?
I do not know. I think the intention is to move their offices to that location. But whether that translates into daily
New.
24/7.
And that's what you meant, Terry, right? Are they going to be hiring for that?
No, not necessarily,
Oh, you-
just is it going to be staffed?
Okay.
All right. That all for public comments? All right. I'll close public comments. We're going to have an executive session for the employment and compensation of a public employee. No decision will be made during this meeting, and then we'll re-adjourn after that. And call a meeting. Do I have a motion to enter executive session?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, first and second.
Sorry.
Ruby is first. Perry is second.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
It does, doesn't it? It looks like I'm sitting forever.
Thanks. I don't. There was a lot of letters, but. Yeah. Yes. All right.